Then, as if someone had tapped him on the shoulder, he returned from his daydream, looking directly at Constance, grinned, and raised his eyebrows expectantly. Then he proudly opened the case. After quickly checking to make sure nothing was damaged, he displayed his treasure for Constance to see. As the case was opened, Constance felt something like a breath of spring enter the room. She couldn't deny it, though part of her wanted to, and she couldn't deny the little girl anticipation she felt either. Constance was unfamiliar with this feeling. She had been raised in a home where surprises were avoided at all costs. All gifts, though wrapped, were practical and known in advance. All of her days were scheduled, and all her activities were thoroughly planned. Even in her nursing, a profession filled with the unexpected, she was rarely surprised, because she so meticulously prepared herself for every conceivable medical problem she might face. Because her career was her life, she even spent time on the bus to the hospital each day, quietly rehearsing what she'd say during the obligatory small talk with other nurses and doctors. But she was not in the hospital now, and she was not in her mother's home now, and she was not caring for someone for whom she would have prepared herself. And so a part of her surrendered. For the first time in her life, Constance Louise Chamberlain surrendered to the simple joy of wonder. At first glance, the only thing in John's Yuletide treasure chest that reminded Constance of a Christmas ornament was the star that virtually filled the left half of the open suitcase. The other objects were an eclectic combination of unusual, beautiful, common, foreign, and old things that all made her wonder, where did they come from? What did they mean? Uncle John's eyes went back and forth between his ornaments and his nurse. He would watch her eyes and guess which piece she was looking at, and then he'd quietly gaze at one with her. This went on for some time, with John continuing to hum unfamiliar tunes. Which one goes on the tree first? She wondered out loud. This one, he answered without hesitation. Then he carefully lifted from the case something that resembled an arched entrance or passageway made of stone. John placed it in the nurse's hands so she could examine it more closely. It was fascinating. It made her think of the kind of doorway people must have entered in ancient times. It seemed made of real stones and mortar. Small as it was, it had been crafted with great attention to detail. A thick piece of cloth hung where Constance expected to see a door. She asked John about it. Thousands of years ago, it was common to place heavy woven pieces over entrances to serve as doors, he said, sounding as though he knew what he was talking about. Then Constance's eyes focused on something that had been painted on the stones above the entrance. It looked as though it had been written long ago in a language she could not read. I made this myself, John said proudly. It's a replica of the entrance to the inn where there was no room for Joseph and Mary. This piece always goes on the tree first. Constance took that as her cue to place the ornament on the tree. Where would you like me to place it? She asked. We have to sing first, he answered. Sing what? She wondered. A little town of Bethlehem or Silent Night? John read her thoughts. No, Connie Lou, not those. We'll sing the forgotten carols. She turned from her study of the ornament in her hand and gave John a quizzical expression. The what? She asked. The forgotten carols. That's what I call them anyway. The carols about characters who played supporting roles in the Christmas story, who have either been forgotten, overlooked, misunderstood, or ignored. How did you find these carols? She questioned. To tell you the truth, Connie Lou, they kind of found me. Take the innkeeper, for example. There was a man who turned away Joseph and Mary, not because he was mean or thoughtless. He was just taking care of business. What haunted him, though, was the feeling that he hadn't really done all he could have for the pregnant woman and her husband. How do you know that? Constance asked, hoping for an answer that made sense. He told me, was his reply. Sure, she thought, that makes sense if you're insane. What do you mean he told you? Constance felt like getting tough. She wasn't going to get drawn any further into such nonsense. He just told me. It was several years after it happened. I had returned to Bethlehem on a sort of pilgrimage I made celebrating the birth, and I spent the night in his inn. We began talking and the subject came up. Then, when he found out who I was, he told me his story. John sat at the piano and began to play. He played with great feeling, but then Constance never believed disturbed people were incapable of feeling. Her studies had taught her that in many psychiatric cases, the feelings are simply misdirected. She thought that if there were ever living proof of that, Uncle John would be it. Closing his eyes so that he would accurately reflect the spirit of the innkeeper as he remembered it, he began to sing.
I am a man forgotten, is my name. Thousands of years will fail to fully erase my shame. But I turned a profit nicely that day, that I turned a couple away. I turned them away. I didn't sleep that evening, though I'd sold out my place. Somehow I felt uneasy. Something about her face. Why did I wish that I'd let them stay? I don't think they could have paid. Or could they have paid? Restless, I left my bedroom. I walked the streets all night, lost in the world I lived in, found by a heavenly light, staring at one bright star in the sky. I heard a baby cry. And I knew where that cry had come from, 'cause I told them where they could go. But I didn't think I could face them, so I walked slowly home, missing my chance to share in their joy. I never saw the boy. He never would condemn me. I did that all on my own. He offered his forgiveness, and ever since then I've known he lets us choose each hour of each day, if we'll let him in to stay. Let him in, let him in, let the joy and the hope begin. Let him in, let him in, let the peace on earth begin. And whether it be in your world today, or a crowd at Bethlehem Inn, find a way, make him room, let him in, let him in, let the peace on earth begin. Let him in, let him in, let the joy and hope begin. Let him in, let him in, let him in, let him in.
When the singing of the first forgotten carol was over, Uncle John rose from the piano, took Constance by the hand, and walked over to the bare Christmas tree. He pointed to a place on the tree that he found worthy of this ornament. He called the spot the heart of the tree. Constance hung the ornament far enough in on the evergreen branch that there was no danger of it accidentally falling off. And as she did, she noticed again the strange writing across the top of the ornament. John read her thoughts and answered, "That is the inscription written by the innkeeper over the entrance of his inn shortly before he died. I wanted to preserve it on the ornament just the way my friend had written it. It says, 'Let him in.'" Before excusing himself to take a nap, Uncle John showed Constance around the main floor of the house. He wanted her to be comfortable, though he knew such a thing was difficult for her. He explained that the butler, who while the family was away also served as a housekeeper, valet, and cook, would be working around the house, and that she should not be alarmed when she heard him come in the back way. Uncle John also mentioned that the butler was shy and probably wouldn't say much, but that she would be a fool to pass up his egg salad sandwiches on rye, were he to offer her some. Uncle John reminded her that she was free to leave at 5 o'clock and asked her not to wake him to say goodbye. He also requested that she leave her phone number on the pad by the telephone in the hall, so the butler could call her in the event of an emergency. Then he climbed the long staircase and was gone. The rest of the afternoon passed rather uneventfully. She heard the butler come in, but the only glimpse she caught of him was when she went into the kitchen to get a drink of water. From what she could tell, which wasn't much, was he was about the same size as Uncle John, with a bit of a belly, a full beard, and very thick glasses. At the stroke of 5, she called a cab and prepared to go home. Although she had never given out her phone number to a man of any age, she felt relatively safe in leaving her number on the pad by the phone, as she'd been asked. Her patient was obviously suffering from bouts of delusion, but if today proved anything, it was that he was perfectly harmless.